We culture.
Walt Disney was a man with endless passion, ambition, and optimism towards his creations. These traits of Walt are what catapulted him into the legend we know today. They are also almost his downfall. After miraculously making a profit off of Snow White and losing tremendous amounts of money on Pinocchio, one would assume Walt would have concluded that maybe these animated films are too much of a financial risk, regardless of the quality. Most businessmen in this scenario would have pulled back on the animated films, but not Walt, living by the high-risk, high-reward business style. The next film we're going to discuss is probably the most ambitious animated project Walt produced, Fantasia. What inspired Walt to create Fantasia wasn't from a novel or fairy tale, but admiration for the world of classical music. After the creation of Snow White, Disney felt his company's mascot Mickey Mouse needed a boost in popularity. Looking to create a spiritual successor to Steamboat Willie, dropping the slapstick, he came up with The Sorcerer's Apprentice. This animated short was based on the poem by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe and orchestral piece of the same name by Paul Dugas. Understanding his limits in the realm of creativity, Walt knew he needed the perfect music to match his vision for this short. Being that the short is classically inspired, the only thing missing was a conductor, and what better choice than Leopold Stokowski? The two had already been friends for some time, and the collaboration seemed almost inevitable. Stokowski was so enthused working on the project that he insisted on producing at no charge to Walt. Walt's popularization of animation was the equivalent to what Stokowski had been doing in classical music at the time. In the late 30s, they were without a doubt the two most popular figures in their respective industries. This collaboration was essentially the modern-day Watch the Throne by Jay-Z and Kanye West, an amazing pop collaboration that was truly a moment in time for the world to marvel at. Once production started, it became apparent to Roy Disney that the budget of The Sorcerer's Apprentice was already too high and impossible to recoup on its own. This is ultimately what led to the creation of Fantasia, as both Disney and Stokowski had come up with a new idea for a feature film blending the two mediums. During the conception stages, they had selected 8 separate classical symphonies. Once the symphonies were selected, a 100-piece studio orchestra would end up being assembled, all handpicked by Stokowski. These musicians would work from 12 to 3 a.m. every night as he believed the night brought out more drive. In order to construct a better vision for the film, Walt had consulted with numerous people from across different academic fields, the most notable being Edwin Hubble, as he helped the two understand theories about deep space, dinosaurs, and the origin of the cosmos. The two also hired professional dancers in order to match appropriate imagery for the film. Fantasia will end up being an anthological film comprised of 8 shorts complemented by each symphony respectively. The opening of Fantasia begins to Deems Taylor's monologue and subsequently transitions to Stokowski conducting Bach's Toccata and Fugue in D minor. Observing Stokowski's conduction, one can interpret how this film is going for an abstract aesthetic. The dynamic range of sound is communicated through the different colors of light. Fantasia's use of abstraction was seen as a different way to approach emotion, circumventing the traditional approaches seen in Snow White and Pinocchio. These films heavily relied on realism to convey emotion. In the animated part of Toccata, there is nothing conventional, which was a very risky yet innovative choice, as this had only been done by experimental artists in Germany. This entire scene was heavily influenced by the works of experimental abstract animator Oskar Fischinger. His style mainly consisted of geometric patterns, in turn animating them into very intricate designs. Fischinger's innovative style can also be seen as a source of inspiration for the intro to Monsters Incorporated. Outside of abstraction, the film incorporates representationalism through scenes of clouds morphing into violins. The powerful imagery displayed in the first film foreshadows the ambiguous, beautiful nature of the others. The next short film is The Nutcracker Suite, which proved how abstraction could be personalized. prior to this, the Nutcracker Suite had already been showcased in numerous plays. Instead of following the general layout of the story, Walt decided to base the song on the different seasons. The core theme of ballet is still present, however, it's represented through nature itself rather than humans. This is truly a beautiful production that exemplifies the strenuous amount of labor that went into these films. Back then, one could only work on 24 drawings per second, and then that would be transferred into cells. Each cell was only the equivalent of 1/24th of a second, thus taking them up to 3 to 4 hours to complete, including all techniques such as inking, coloring, airbrushing, etc. The next film in the anthology will be The Sorcerer's Apprentice, by far the most popular out of the 8 films. Before diving into this film, an important note should be made in regards to Mickey Mouse. The Sorcerer's Apprentice was the first major redesign of the character since the early 20s. The style goes for a more softer pear-like shape since circles, which comprise his original design, look more rigid. While his style had gradually evolved in the 30s, Fantasia was a film that garnered his modern look everyone recognizes him by today. The film's animation style was very demanding, most likely due to the score by Dukas. Mickey's movements are in sync with most of the score, which is very enjoyable to look at. Nothing exemplifies this more than when Mickey brings the brooms to life. As for Mickey's master, now more commonly known as Yen Sid, is based on Walt Disney himself. Yen Sid's raising of the eyebrow was something Disney commonly did around the studio. The Sorcerer's Apprentice is definitely one of the more entertaining short films, as it only tries to showcase the wonderful animation on top of humor. The Rite of Spring is the 4th film in Fantasia. It was originally interpreted as a series of primitive dances, however the story Disney chose to tell was the origin of life. Choosing the origin of life was a pretty controversial yet innovative topic, as most of the country leaned more towards creation-based beliefs. This film is most likely why Edwin Hubble was consulted, as it displays elaborate sequences of space, planets, and dinosaurs. These marvelous special effects were in no small part created by teams of the Process Lab. The Process Lab is where special effects were experimented on and put into film. In the case of the smoking volcanoes, this was done by placing upside down cans of paint into vats of water. Then as the paint spilled out, it developed smoke-like patterns. The last film to be discussed in depth is The Night on Bald Mountain, paired with the Ave Maria. Night on Bald Mountain is one of the few films that actually follows the original source material. Animator Bill Tyler is credited with bringing this chilling sequence to life. The design of Chernobog, yeah, that annoying boss from Kingdom Hearts, was inspired by Albert Herter's sketch of a demon sitting on top of a mountain unfolding its wings. This position can also be seen as a reference to gargoyles and Gothic architecture. While Night on Bald Mountain fills up audiences with fear, the Ave Maria transfers that emotional shock into a more calming experience. The Ave Maria is without a doubt one of the most elaborate single shots in film history. The scene was shot continuously by a crew of 9 men over 6 full days and nights using a horizontal multi-billion camera set up across the entire Disney soundstage. Due to the extremely expensive production that went into the making of Fantasia, it had a very limited release. Disney insisted on introducing his patent Fantasound into theaters in order to create a different audio experience. Fantasound was essentially stereophonic sound, which is audio that surrounds an environment with different speakers and channels. This sound system is the standard formula for 90% of theaters today. The sound system, however, was too elaborate for the time, with only 12 venues being able to equip it, making a worldwide release impossible. The response to Fantasia was split amongst music and casual fans.
Anything interesting much of the time. I'm feeling a decent 2 strong 3 on this one.
Music purists believe that the animation was dragging down the perfect classical music, whereas casual fans loved it. Sadly, Walt's vision had backfired on him as he lost tremendous amounts of money on Fantasia. The financial losses were far greater than Pinocchio's. Even Disney's original distributor, RKO, refused to distribute the film, forcing them to do it alone. In the end, as Walt would put it, it was a
artistic success, financial failure. You know?
Certainly an artistic success. It was a magnificent.
Well, there's some people would question that too.
After spending excessive amounts of money on the first 3 films, Walt and Roy realized this couldn't be an option for their fourth film, Dumbo. While Dumbo was the fourth film, the slot was originally for Bambi, but because of production difficulties, it was pushed back. Walt was far less involved in this film than the other five, which was for a couple different reasons. The first being a major increase in employment from the days of Snow White. During the production of Snow White, there were hundreds of employees, but by Dumbo, the employment was well into the thousands. Walt began to put more trust into his veteran animators to oversee projects as they had become more acclimated with the work process over the years. The second reason stemmed from a worker strike that had deep psychological impact on how Disney viewed its employees forever. At the time, most people employed in the Hollywood district felt their wages were considerably low on top of having virtually no benefits. No studio felt this more than Disney. Not all animators felt this way. Those who did were mostly from the inking, coloring, and in-between department. Most of the top animators and directors were extremely loyal to Walt, on top of the fact they were paid considerably well in comparison to their peers. However, there was one top animator who agreed with and spearheaded the workers' strike, Art Babbitt. Credited with creating Goofy, Babbitt was one of the studio's most acclaimed animators and was disgusted by how Disney was treating his employees. Walt held a company meeting in response to this and essentially gave the good old strap up your bootstraps, stop complaining, figure out a way on your own, etc. type of speech. The speech not only outraged Babbitt, but most of his employees, even those who were indifferent at the time.
In the 20 years I have spent in this business, I've weathered many storms. It's been far from easy sailing. It's required a great deal of hard work, struggle, determination, confidence, faith, and above all, unselfishness. Some people think that we have class distinction in this place. They wonder why some get better seats in the theater than others. They wonder why some men get spaces in the parking lot and others don't. I have always felt, and always will feel, that the men who contribute the most to the organization should, out of respect alone, enjoy some privileges. My first recommendation to the lot of you is this: put your own house in order. You can't accomplish a damn thing by sitting around and waiting to be told everything. If you're not progressing as you should, instead of grumbling and growling, do something about it.
Man, what the fuck is you talking about? What the fuck was that? I'm sorry.
Disney's speech caused a lot of animators to join the Screen Cartoonists Guild, the first labor union for cartoonists. This in turn deeply hurt Disney as he saw nothing wrong with his company. What did Disney think was causing its employees to leave? Was it unfair payment? Nah, just communism. Disney ended up publicly blaming communism for the root of his employees' departure.
I believed at that time that Mr. Sorrell was a communist because of all the things that I had heard and had seen his name appearing on many of the Commie Front things. And when he pulled the strike, the first people to smear me and put me on the unfair list were all of the Commie Front organizations. I can't remember them all.
Outraged, he even went as far as to blacklist all employees who joined the strike, slowly firing each of them as they rejoined the studio once a resolution was made between the two parties. Disney from this point onward became less involved and tasked his loyalists Ben Sharpenstein, Joe Grant, and Dick Huemer to direct and develop Dumbo. The goal of Dumbo is for the film to be simple and inexpensive. It was more of a simple story than one of a misfit. It can be easily translated across any medium and almost everyone can relate to it. The Misfit theme is based on a 1938 children's book of the same name by Helen Aberson and Harold Pearl. The movie really tries to make the audience feel bad for Dumbo as he's essentially bullied the entire film for something he can't control. Then he channels that negativity into something positive by learning how to fly. Very simple yet effective storytelling. Aside of the story, simplicity in Dumbo is relayed through the cartoony style, reminiscent of the Silly Symphony cartoons. Despite it being cartoony in style, Dumbo still gives convincing characters since their personalities reflect their design. Everyone can see Dumbo as a humanoid toddler through his baby face and soft design. Dumbo also displays irony through Timothy Miles and Dumbo, since realistically, elephants are afraid of mice. Probably the most interesting scene in Dumbo is the pink elephant scene, which was a parody of surrealism. Surrealists attempt to channel the unconscious as a means to unlock the power of imagination. This is most likely why Dumbo begins to go on this trip after becoming drunk. Salvador Dali, who was a leading figure in this art movement at the time, was also friends with Walt Disney, so his influence was likely. As far as cinematic inspirations, Dumbo was heavily inspired by German films such as Nosferatu. The scene of Timothy Miles sneaking around the Ringmaster is a homage to the vampire shadow in Nosferatu. Dumbo was the first and most financially successful film released by Disney throughout the 1940s. Its low production budget, matched with great emotional storytelling, made the film both a financial and critical success. Now I have to address the elephant in the room. No pun intended. I ignored mentioning two parts in regards to Fantasia and Dumbo, both of which are extremely offensive and racist. Now I know all you animation enthusiasts will try to defend Disney screaming, "That's not racist," but hear me out. The Pastoral Symphony and the Crows and Dumbo are without a doubt negative stereotypes of African Americans. The Pickaninny in Fantasia is literally seen serving a bunch of white, beautiful centaurs. Her design matches depictions of Pickaninnies historically. The same goes for the Crows, with the leader being named, Jim Crow, that institutional law and movement that kept black people oppressed for another 100 plus years post-slavery and was still active during the release of this film. Also, just because most of the Crows are voiced by black people doesn't mean that it's not racist. It still all traces back to the white writers, animators, and Disney himself giving the green light on this entire scene. Also, since people want to make an argument that this is how black people talk on jazz records, let's modernize it. Let's put the Crows in the Tim Burton version, but instead of the Crows jamming to a bunch of jazz, let's swap it with hip hop. Pants sagging, beatboxing, 40s in hand, the whole nine. Seems a little fucked up, doesn't it? Wouldn't fly today. Not because the word is sensitive, but people have enough fucking common sense to know what's offensive and what's not. This portrayal of the Crow is literally no different than a typical blackface segment at the minstrel show. For those who don't know, minstrel shows were entertainment-based events where white actors would put on blackface mocking black people portraying racial stereotypes. These shows are packaged with music and comedic skits for white people of all ages, especially kids. You know what else is a coincidence? A recurring character was also named Jim Crow during the age of minstrel shows. Then I also hear how the Crows are allegedly the only people that understand Dumbo as their outcasts themselves. What a lose to them being outcasts. They're Crows and they're amongst their own. I don't see how that makes them be able to empathize with Dumbo. Dumbo was bullied and nobody liked him outside of the mouse. To me personally, the Disney staff knew the Crows, aka black people, were an oppressed group and felt the need to trivialize it. I don't care if they're good characters or not. When you decide to use a character named Jim Crow in order to serve as a plot point to relate to bullying, it undermines the deep systemic oppression that black people have experienced historically. Black people deserve far more respect than that. So yeah, I digress. I'm not here to educate you all on racism within cartoons. That'd take all day. But it wouldn't sit well with my spirit if I didn't address it to some capacity.
But anywho,
Wake up! Wake up!
Oh, what now?
The fifth and final animated film to be discussed is none other than Bambi. Bambi, like Fantasia, has a pretty unorthodox origin, with it having nothing to do with Disney at all. Bambi's conception derived from director Sidney Franklin, who had been trying to turn the book by Felix Salten into a live-action film for years. Franklin had concluded that the film couldn't be made through the medium and opted for a different one, animation. His stories are known to have a great sense of character and story, so Disney ended up being his first option. Walt was enthused to be working on the film, but was met with production difficulties immediately. The biggest issue tasked on the artists and animators was creating animals that were realistic yet expressive. Artists would study animal anatomy by visiting local zoos, studying books on animal anatomy, and through lectures by art professors. As for expressivism, the Disney staff would study babies in order to understand their natural facial expressions. Animator Tyrus Wong was essential to the art development for this film. Wong served as the art director due to his proficient skill in impressionism. His innovative backgrounds focused on detail around the center and less around the edges, leading viewers to focus on characters. Bambi's impressionism wasn't trying to depict nature, but go for the feeling one would get once they enter a forest. Once the Disney staff had finalized on the style for characters, they quickly ran into problems in the animation department. One issue in particular was animating snow in a convincing way. Finding no solutions through drawing, animators decided to film cornflakes falling in slow motion and bleach them afterward. This saved a lot of time and looked even more convincing than the animated hand-drawn snowflakes. After 6 long hard years, the Disney animators had created a masterpiece never seen before. Bambi is the first animated film to surround its premise around the circle of life. Life, struggle, death, and rebirth. Every aspect of the story is relatable in some capacity. Everyone remembers trying something for the first time and failing at it, losing a loved one, having a mentor, having to grow up. Bambi is a tale about life, the good, the bad, and the ugly. What's marvelous about this story though is how nothing is told but is instead shown. In the entire film, there are only about 1,000 words of dialogue. Words can get in the way of a story when it can be so easily communicated visually. One of the greatest examples of visual storytelling is when Bambi's mother dies. After Bambi is told by his father that his mother is dead, only a single tear comes down his face, symbolizing the end of childhood. Why have Bambi cry hysterically or question his father even more when it can be simply shown through a painful tear? From a cultural standpoint, this was also the first permanent death of a major character in animation. It laid out the blueprint for making powerful death scenes in animation. Probably no other film took more inspiration from this than The Lion King. The second most important theme in Bambi is the critique of man's negative impact on the forest. Not one human is shown, yet their negative actions and influence are felt throughout the film. Something most humans love and adore, such as a dog, is essentially depicted as demonic in Bambi, proving how relative life truly is. Our gluttonous joy of eating deer came at the cost of our protagonist's mother. Our pursuit of hunting caused the disruption of the entire forest ecosystem. Man in this case doesn't have to be explicitly shown since his influence is negatively omnipresent throughout the film. What makes this style of storytelling even more effective is the music. From beginning to end, there are only 2 scenes of silence, when Bambi's mom explains the dangers of the meadow and when she dies. Silence is used for viewers to feel the intensity of the moment. Music isn't used to progress the story like in the cases of Snow White or Pinocchio, but is instead seamlessly woven into the film. The Disney animators most likely learned how to effectively do this through Fantasia. One of the more notable scores in Bambi is Beethoven's Pastoral Symphony, which is perfect for a forest environment. It doesn't serve any other purpose than to get one immersed in the film. When Bambi starts walking for the first time, Beethoven's score makes the scene so much more elegant and innocent than if it were just silent. Sadly, Bambi, like Pinocchio and Fantasia, was a financial failure. This would be the film that forced Walt to shift his focus from animated films to live action, as the company had little money for them. While this may be seen as a conformist tactic, the live action films ultimately saved the company. Sometimes you have to do what you don't want in order to get what you do want. Overall, Bambi is a wonderful film that manages to capture Dumbo's simplicity, Fantasia's experimentation, Pinocchio's personality, and like Snow White, prove that animation is indeed art. Art, innovation, experimentation, story, masterpieces. This is what these 5 films encompass, and many more Disney films to come after. All of the masterful films we love today, such as Toy Story, Aladdin, Akira, Spirited Away, simply couldn't exist without the 5 films' blueprint of what animation could be. It's truly hard to imagine a world without Disney, as animation truly wouldn't be the same, and it all started with one man and his dream. A dream to push a medium further than anyone could ever imagine, raising generations through great works of art. This dream couldn't have been manifested, however, without the magnificent staff. They're the true heroes of this tale of animation. Shout out to anyone who has a dream, is on the path of pursuing it. Don't look back, trust your process, and most importantly, keep moving forward. Thank you for watching this 2-part series. A lot went into the creation of this project, and I hope you enjoyed these videos, as I'm certainly proud of them. So hit that like button if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more content, and comment as I'm interested to hear your thoughts. Also check out our Instagram and Twitter page, as we post daily history of animation, video games, music, comics, you name it, we do it. Peace and love.